Hey everyone, before we step into a story that will break your heart, make your blood boil, and then slowly put the pieces back together with hope and courage, please take a moment to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. What you are about to hear is a true account of a family's fight against hatred, a little girl's silent suffering, and a mother's relentless determination to protect her child. Trust me, you will not want to miss a single word. Now let's begin. Lisa Johnson was 8 years old. She had bright, curious eyes and a smile that could light up any room. She was the kind of child who made friends easily, who laughed without restraint, and who saw the world as a place full of wonder and possibility. But when her family moved to a new neighborhood, that innocent smile began to fade, and no one, not even her own parents, understood why at first. It was a warm summer evening when the moving truck rumbled away from the modest two-story house on a quiet suburban street. Nina and Malcolm Johnson stood with their daughter Lisa on their new front lawn, boxes piled around them, dreams of a better future hanging in the air. The oak tree in the front yard swayed gently in the breeze. Lisa bounced on her toes, taking in the unfamiliar surroundings. "It's different," she said finally, "but I like the tree. Can we put a swing on it?" Nina laughed, some of the tension easing from her shoulders. "We'll see, sweetheart. Maybe once we're all settled in." Malcolm wiped sweat from his brow. "That's the last of the boxes," he announced. "What do you say we order some pizza and call it a day?" They walked inside, their footsteps echoing in the empty house. But as they did, they couldn't help noticing the curious glances from their new neighbors. They were, after all, the only black family on the street, perhaps in the entire neighborhood. That evening, as they sat around a box serving as a makeshift table, Malcolm raised his slice of pizza in a toast. "To new beginnings," he said, his voice warm with hope. Nina and Lisa echoed the sentiment, their pizza slices meeting with a soft clink. They talked about their hopes. Nina's home office where she could work on her designs, Malcolm's new job in the city, and Lisa's new school. "Do you think I'll make friends?" Lisa asked, her mouth full of cheese and pepperoni. Nina and Malcolm exchanged a glance, their smiles faltering slightly. "Of course you will, sweetie," Nina assured her. "You're smart, kind, and funny. The other kids will love you." Malcolm added, "Just be yourself, Lisa. That's all you need to do." But beneath the excitement, there was an undercurrent of uncertainty. They were venturing into a predominantly white neighborhood that might not be as welcoming as they hoped. Nina and Malcolm had discussed this at length before making the move, weighing the opportunities against the potential challenges. "We're doing this for Lisa," Malcolm had said during one of their late-night conversations. "Better schools, safer streets. She deserves every chance we can give her." Nina had agreed, but now, surrounded by unfamiliar shadows, she couldn't shake the anxiety. As if sensing her mother's unease, Lisa snuggled up next to Nina on the couch. "I'm glad we're here together," she said simply. Nina squeezed her daughter's hand. "Me too, baby." The next morning came too quickly. The early sun cast long shadows across the driveway as Nina and Malcolm stood with Lisa, waiting for the school bus. Lisa clutched her new backpack, her eyes darting up and down the street. The distant rumble of an engine caught their attention as the yellow school bus rounded the corner. Nina felt her heart rate quicken. This was it, the moment they'd been both anticipating and dreading. The bus pulled up, its doors creaking open. The driver, a middle-aged white man with graying hair, looked down at them. Surprise flickered across his face, quickly replaced by a neutral expression. "Good morning," he said, his tone polite but not warm. "You must be new to the route." Nina nodded. "Yes, we just moved in. This is Lisa. She'll be riding with you." The driver nodded curtly. "Welcome aboard, Lisa. I'm Mr. Miller." Lisa hesitated, looking back at her parents. Nina gave her an encouraging nod, and Malcolm whispered, "You've got this, sweetheart." Taking a deep breath, Lisa climbed the steps. As she disappeared into the bus, Nina and Malcolm caught a glimpse of the other children inside, some curious, a few smiling, but one or two wearing expressions that made Nina's stomach clench. As the bus pulled away, Nina and Malcolm stood hand in hand watching until it disappeared around the corner. "She'll be fine," Malcolm said, giving Nina's hand a reassuring squeeze, but there was a hint of uncertainty in his voice that matched the worry in Nina's heart. The day seemed to crawl for Nina. She tried to focus on setting up her home office, but her thoughts kept drifting to Lisa. Was she making friends? Were the teachers kind? Was she feeling out of place? When the time came for Lisa to return, Nina found herself pacing by the window. The familiar rumble of the bus engine sent her hurrying to the door. Lisa bounded down the steps, her backpack bouncing. Nina's heart lifted at the sight of her daughter's smile. Mom," Lisa called, waving. Nina enveloped her in a hug.
Suatia.
How was your first day? Lisa's excitement was contagious as she recounted her nice teacher, the girl she sat next to at lunch, and the cool playground equipment. Relief washed over Nina. Seemed like things had gone well. That evening at dinner, Lisa continued to share stories. Malcolm listened intently, laughing at her animated descriptions. Then, as the conversation lulled, Lisa suddenly said, "Our bus driver is rude." Nina and Malcolm exchanged surprised glances. "What do you mean, honey?" Nina asked carefully. Lisa shrugged, suddenly uncomfortable. "He just says mean things sometimes," she mumbled. Then she quickly changed the subject, asking Malcolm about his new office. Nina caught Malcolm's eye over Lisa's head, seeing her own concern reflected there. But they didn't push it, not wanting to dampen Lisa's otherwise positive first day. Later that night, as they got ready for bed, Malcolm brought it up. "What do you think Lisa meant about the bus driver?" Nina sighed. "I don't know. Maybe he's just gruff. But it could be something. Should we ask her more about it?" Malcolm asked. Nina shook her head. "Not yet. Let's give it a few days, see if she mentions anything else. We don't want to make her anxious if it's nothing." Malcolm nodded, but Nina could see the worry lines creasing his forehead. She felt it too, that nagging sense that something wasn't quite right. The weeks that followed seemed to settle into a routine. Malcolm left early each morning for his commute. Nina worked from her home office. Lisa continued to ride the bus. But beneath the surface of this new routine, Nina couldn't shake a growing sense of unease. She noticed subtle changes in Lisa's behavior. The bubbly, talkative girl who had excitedly recounted every detail of her first few days now gave only brief, non-committal answers. One afternoon, Nina found Lisa sitting by the living room window, staring outside with a distant look. "Lisa, is everything okay?" Lisa startled, as if pulled from deep thoughts. "Yeah, Mom, I'm fine." But her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. Nina sat down next to her. "You know you can talk to me about anything, right? If something's bothering you." Lisa just nodded, leaning into her mother's touch without saying a word. That evening, while Malcolm worked late, Nina decided to broach the subject again. She sat next to Lisa on the couch, casually asking about her day. When Lisa gave her usual short answers, Nina gently brought up the bus driver comment from weeks ago. "Remember when you said the bus driver sometimes says mean things? Has anything like that happened again?" Lisa tensed visibly, her small hands fidgeting with the hem of her shirt. "It's nothing, Mommy," she insisted, but her voice quivered. Nina noticed her eyes darting around, almost as if she was afraid someone might overhear. The sight made Nina's heart ache. What was her daughter so afraid of? "Lisa, sweetheart," Nina said, cupping Lisa's face gently. "You know you can tell me anything, right? If someone is being mean to you, or if you're scared about something, I want to know. I'm here to help you." For a moment, it seemed like Lisa might open up. Her lower lip trembled, and tears welled up in her eyes. But then, as quickly as it had appeared, the vulnerability vanished. Lisa pulled away, forcing a smile. "I'm fine, Mom." "Really? Can I go play in my room now?" Nina nodded, her heart heavy. When Malcolm finally got home, Nina shared her observations. She told him about Lisa's strange behavior, her gut feeling that something was wrong, and her failed attempt to get Lisa to open up. Malcolm listened, his brow furrowed. When Nina finished, he sighed heavily. "Nina, I think you might be overreacting. Lisa is just adjusting. It's a big change for all of us." Nina felt a flare of frustration. "But Malcolm, you haven't seen how she's been acting. I really think—" Malcolm cut her off, his voice rising slightly. "I have enough problems at work, Nina. I don't need you bringing this up again. Just let it go. Lisa's fine. Don't make this into something it's not." The kitchen fell silent. Nina turned away, hurt and angry. Malcolm immediately regretted his outburst but didn't know how to take back his words. They finished preparing dinner in tense silence. That night, as they lay in bed with their backs turned to each other, Nina couldn't sleep. She replayed Lisa's words and actions in her mind, her maternal instinct screaming that something was very wrong. But Malcolm's dismissal of her concerns left her feeling isolated and unsure. What if she was overreacting? What if Lisa was just going through a normal adjustment period? But then why did she have this persistent feeling of dread in the pit of her stomach? As the first light of dawn began to creep through the curtains, Nina made a decision. If no one else would take her concerns seriously, she would have to find out the truth herself. Tomorrow, she would take matters into her own hands. The next morning dawned gray and overcast, matching Nina's mood. As Lisa climbed onto the bus, Nina waved with a mixture of worry and determination. Today would be different. The moment the bus pulled away, Nina sprang into action. She grabbed her car keys and a light jacket, her heart pounding. She kept a safe distance as she followed the yellow school bus through the winding suburban streets. At each stop, she noticed something odd. Lisa seemed to be the last to board, even when other children were waiting at the same stop. Was this coincidence, or was there more to it? At one point, Nina thought she saw Mr. Miller say something to Lisa as she climbed the steps. Lisa's shoulders seemed to hunch slightly. When they finally reached the school, Nina parked across the street. She watched as Mr. Miller helped the kids off the bus with a smile. When it was Lisa's turn, he even gave her a friendly pat on the shoulder. Nina felt a confusing mix of relief and bewilderment. From what she could see, Mr. Miller seemed perfectly kind and professional. So why did Lisa say he was rude? Why did she seem so uncomfortable? As she drove home, Nina tried to reconcile what she'd seen with her gut feeling. Maybe she was overreacting, but a nagging doubt remained. What if Mr. Miller had noticed her following and changed his behavior? Back at home, Nina tried to focus on her work, but her mind kept drifting back to what she'd witnessed. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was missing something crucial. The pieces of the puzzle were there, but she couldn't quite make them fit. The following afternoon, Nina found herself at the local park, watching Lisa play on the swings. A neighbor named Sarah sat down on the bench next to her. They chatted about the neighborhood, the weather, the challenges of moving. Finally, gathering her courage, Nina decided to broach the subject that had been consuming her thoughts. "Sarah, can I ask you something? It's about the school bus driver, Mr. Miller. Lisa mentioned he can be rude. I've been a little concerned. Have you heard anything similar from other parents?" The change in Sarah's demeanor was immediate and shocking. Her friendly smile vanished, replaced by a hard, angry expression. "How dare you?" Sarah hissed. "How dare you accuse Mr. Miller of anything? He's been driving the kids in this neighborhood for decades. He's a good man." Nina was stunned into silence. Sarah continued her tirade. "You just came into this neighborhood and you're already causing trouble. If you don't like it, you're free to leave." The thinly veiled racism in Sarah's outburst left Nina feeling sick to her stomach. She stammered an apology and hurried away, her heart pounding. That night, after Lisa had gone to bed, Nina sat alone in the living room. She hadn't told Malcolm about the encounter. She couldn't bear to see the "I told you so" look in his eyes. But now, more than ever, Nina was convinced that something was deeply wrong. Sarah's overreaction had only strengthened her resolve. She would continue to investigate on her own. She would watch, listen, and gather evidence. The weeks that followed were filled with a tense, uneasy quiet. Nina and Malcolm were hypervigilant, watching Lisa for any signs of distress. But she seemed to be doing better. The cloud that had hung over her appeared to be lifting. Nina found herself wondering if perhaps her fears had been unfounded. Maybe Lisa had just been going through an adjustment period. The thought brought both relief and a twinge of guilt. Had she really been on the verge of appending their lives over nothing? Then came the afternoon that changed everything. Nina was at her desk, deeply engrossed in a design project. She glanced at the clock. Almost time for Lisa to return. She went to the kitchen to prepare an after-school snack. For a clock came and went. Nina wasn't worried yet. Sometimes the bus ran a few minutes late. But as 4:15 approached with no sign of Lisa, a knot of anxiety began to form in her stomach. By 4:30, Nina was pacing the living room, phone in hand. She called Malcolm. "I'm sure it's nothing," she said, trying to convince herself. "Maybe the bus broke down, but I'm getting worried." Malcolm's voice was tense. "I'm leaving work now. I'll be home as soon as I can." "Have you called the school?" Nina hadn't. She called the school, her voice shaking. The receptionist informed her that all buses had returned to the depot and the school was closing for the day. "But my daughter isn't home," Nina insisted. "She has to be somewhere. Can't you check?" The receptionist's voice was sympathetic but firm. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Johnson, but all our staff have left. If your daughter doesn't turn up soon, I suggest you call the police." Nina hung up, her hands trembling. Malcolm arrived home to find her in tears, frantically dialing the bus depot. They clung to each other, both imagining worst-case scenarios. The ticking of the clock on the mantel seemed to mock them. "This is all my fault," Nina whispered. "I knew something was wrong. I should have done more." Malcolm pulled her close. "This is not your fault, Nina. We'll find her." Just as Nina was about to grab her keys and drive around the neighborhood, they heard the creak of the front door. Time seemed to stand still as they turned to see Lisa walk in 2 hours late, her yellow skirt wrinkled, her pink shirt askew, her neat braids disheveled. Nina rushed to her daughter, wrapping her in a tight embrace. "Where have you been? We were so worried." Malcolm joined them, enveloping both in his arms. For a moment, they stood there, relief and fear mingling. But as Nina pulled back to look at her daughter, she felt her blood run cold. Lisa was pale, her eyes wide and filled with unshed tears. She was trembling. There was something in her expression, a mix of fear, shame, and something else Nina couldn't identify. "Lisa, sweetheart," Nina said softly, cupping her daughter's face in her hands. "What happened? Where were you?" Lisa looked up at her parents, her lower lip quivering. In a voice barely above a whisper, she said the words that would shatter their world. "The bus driver did it again." The room fell silent. The weight of her words hung heavy in the air. Nina and Malcolm exchanged a horrified glance. They guided Lisa to the living room couch, sitting on either side of her, creating a protective cocoon. Malcolm gently took Lisa's hand while Nina stroked her back. "Sweetheart," Nina began, her voice soft but firm. "We need you to tell us everything. What do you mean the bus driver did it again? What has he been doing?" Lisa hesitated, her small frame shaking. After a tense moment, she began to speak, her voice quavering. "Mr. Miller, he doesn't like me. He doesn't like our kind." Nina and Malcolm exchanged a pained look over Lisa's head. Malcolm squeezed Lisa's hand, urging her to continue. Lisa took a deep breath and revealed the full extent of what she had been enduring. Mr. Miller had been making passive-aggressive and racist remarks. He would mutter things under his breath as she boarded the bus, or make pointed comments about certain people not belonging in the neighborhood. "When I said he was rude before," Lisa continued, "I was scared. I didn't know how to explain it. I thought maybe I was imagining things." Nina felt a wave of guilt wash over her. She had sensed something was wrong, but she hadn't pushed hard enough. She hadn't protected her daughter. Then Lisa dropped the bombshell. This wasn't the first time Mr. Miller had left her stranded. He had done it once before, about a month ago, dropping her off on a deserted road far from home. "He told me if I ever told anyone, I would regret it," Lisa said, her voice barely audible. "He said no one would believe me anyway because of the color of my skin." Nina pulled Lisa into a tight embrace, her own tears falling freely. Malcolm stood up, pacing the room, his fists clenched in rage. "Today," Lisa continued, her words muffled against Nina's shoulder, "he did it again. He stopped the bus and told me to get out. I was so scared, Mommy. I didn't know where I was or how to get home." As Lisa's story unfolded, Nina and Malcolm were overwhelmed with horror, guilt, and fierce protective anger. "I walked for a long time," Lisa said. "I was afraid to ask anyone for help because Mr. Miller said if I told anyone, he'd make sure we had to leave, that everyone would know we didn't belong here." Malcolm knelt in front of Lisa, taking her small hands in his. "Lisa, listen to me. What Mr. Miller did was wrong, very, very wrong. And it's not your fault. Do you understand? None of this is your fault. Lisa nodded, fresh tears spilling down her cheeks. "I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner," she whispered. Nina hugged her tighter. "Oh, baby, you have nothing to be sorry for. We're so proud of you for being brave and telling us now." As Lisa's story came to an end, she seemed to deflate, exhausted and emotionally drained. Nina and Malcolm shared a determined look. "Lisa," Malcolm said gently, "we need to call the police. What Mr. Miller did is not just wrong. It's against the law. We need to make sure he can't do this to you or any other child ever again." Lisa's eyes widened in fear. "But what if they don't believe me? What if Mr. Miller was right and they think I'm lying?" Nina cupped Lisa's face in her hands, looking directly into her eyes. "We believe you, sweetheart, and we will make them believe you too. We won't let anyone hurt you or scare you ever again. I promise." As Malcolm reached for the phone to dial 911, Nina held Lisa close. Her mind raced. She thought about Sarah's hostile reaction, about the neighbors who had watched them with suspicion. Would the police take them seriously? Would they face more racism and disbelief? But looking at Lisa's tear-stained face, Nina knew they had no choice. They had to fight, and not just for Lisa, but for every child who might face discrimination and abuse. As the sound of sirens grew closer, Nina steadied herself for the battle ahead. The police arrived, 2 officers, a tall white man and a younger black woman. They listened as the family recounted the day's events and the ongoing issues with Mr. Miller. Officer Thompson, the male officer, was careful and skeptical. Officer Brooks was more gentle, encouraging Lisa to share as much as she felt comfortable. When Lisa finished, Officer Thompson cleared his throat. "That's quite an accusation. Mr. Miller has been a respected member of this community for decades." Nina felt a surge of anger. "Are you saying you don't believe our daughter?" Officer Brooks quickly intervened. "What my partner means is that we need to investigate thoroughly. This is a serious allegation." Malcolm, who had been silent, spoke up. "We understand that, but our daughter has been traumatized. We need to know that you're taking this seriously." Officer Thompson nodded, though his expression remained skeptical. "We'll need to speak with Mr. Miller, of course, and we'll need to corroborate Lisa's story. Are there any other children who might have witnessed anything?" Lisa shook her head. "Mr. Miller always made sure I was the last one on the bus," she whispered. As the officers prepared to leave, Nina made a decision. "We want to go with you when you talk to Mr. Miller." Officer Thompson looked uncomfortable. "Ma'am, that's not really protocol." Nina stood her ground. "I don't care about protocol. This is our daughter. We need to see this through." After a moment of hesitation, Officer Brooks nodded. They drove to Mr. Miller's house, a modest 2-story home with a neatly manicured lawn. Nina and Malcolm stayed in the car with Lisa while the officers approached. Through the window, they watched Mr. Miller answer the door, his expression changing from confusion to defensiveness. After what felt like an eternity, the officers returned. "Mr. Miller denies everything," Officer Thompson said. "Says he's never mistreated any child." Nina felt a wave of despair, but before she could respond, a woman hurried across the street, waving to get the officers' attention. It was another mother from the neighborhood, one of the few other black families in the area. "I couldn't help overhearing," the woman said, slightly out of breath. "And I need to tell you, this woman is right. We've experienced something similar with our 2 kids. We didn't have the courage to speak up. We just decided to drive the kids ourselves instead." Nina felt a surge of hope. Finally, corroboration. Officer Brooks's eyes narrowed with renewed determination. "Ma'am, we're going to need to take an official statement from you. This changes things significantly." The next few hours passed in a blur. More officers arrived. Mr. Miller was taken in for questioning. Other families, emboldened by the unfolding events, came forward with their own stories. As dawn broke, Nina stood on her front porch, watching as Mr. Miller was led away in handcuffs. The sight brought a complex mix of emotions: relief, vindication, but also sadness at the reality of the world they lived in. Malcolm joined her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "It's over," he said softly. Nina shook her head.
No.
"It's just beginning. We have a lot of work to do to make sure this never happens again. Not to Lisa, not to any child." In the days that followed, the Johnson family found themselves at the center of a community in turmoil. The story spread quickly, dividing opinions and stirring up long-buried tensions. Neighbors who had once avoided them now offered hesitant apologies. The school board held an emergency meeting, and Nina spoke with a voice that cut through the chaos. "This isn't about one incident or one person," she said firmly. "This is about creating a community where all our children feel safe and valued. We need to look at the bigger picture, at the biases and prejudices that allowed this to happen." Her words struck a chord. A group of parents, both black and white, formed a diversity and inclusion committee. They began working on proposals for cultural sensitivity training, more diverse hiring practices, and a new system for reporting concerns. At home, Nina and Malcolm focused on helping Lisa heal. They found a therapist who specialized in working with children who had experienced racial trauma. Slowly, they saw glimpses of their vibrant, confident daughter reemerging. One afternoon, there was a knock at the door. Nina opened it to find Sarah, the neighbor who had lashed out at her in the park, standing there with downcast eyes. "I owe you an apology," Sarah said. "I was wrong to dismiss your concerns. I'm sorry for how I treated you." Nina was taken aback. For a moment, she was tempted to shut the door. But then she thought of Lisa, of the world they were trying to create. "Thank you for saying that," Nina said finally. "It means a lot." Mr. Miller's trial came and went. With the testimony of multiple families, he was convicted and sentenced. The day the verdict was announced, Nina held Lisa close. "You did it, baby. You were so brave. And you helped make sure he can't hurt anyone else." Lisa looked up at her mother, a small smile playing on her lips. "We did it, Mom. All of us together." As spring bloomed, bringing new life to the neighborhood, Nina felt a sense of cautious optimism. There was still work to be done, challenges to be faced, but they had chosen to stay, to be part of the change they wanted to see. One sunny afternoon, Nina watched from her porch as Lisa boarded the school bus. The new driver, a kind-faced woman of color, greeted each child with a warm smile. Lisa turned and waved to her mother before taking her seat, chatting animatedly with a diverse group of friends. Nina waved back, her heart full. They had faced darkness and come out the other side. They had turned a painful experience into an opportunity for growth and change. As the bus pulled away, Nina took a deep breath of the fresh spring air. There would be more challenges ahead, she knew. The work of creating a truly inclusive community was ongoing. But for now, in this moment, she allowed herself to feel hope. Hope for Lisa, hope for their family, and hope for a future where every child could feel safe, valued, and at home. If the story moved you, please take a moment to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Share this video with someone who needs to hear that courage and determination can overcome even the darkest of situations. Thank you for watching. Until next time.